everyone, and welcome back to the channel. It's hot as balls. It was like 90 degrees today. My body does not handle the heat super well, so I was in a mood and mostly naked the entire day, but that's neither here nor there. Welcome back to the channel. I'm so happy to see you here. Today, we're going to be talking about the Harbinger. The Harbinger is the Necromancer Elite specialization for End of Dragons and is a master of elixirs, potions, and all things Zaitan in terms of its magic and just overall noxious chemicals. And it's really a fun Elite spec. I didn't really know how I felt about it when I first played it. I'm warming up to it as I am with almost all of these Elite specs. Of course, some thematic disagreements, but overall the Harbinger, in terms of efficacy, is really, really good. It's really strong, and there are certain builds that allow you to be a very awesome boon provider, and it's pretty low impact and simple. So in this build, we're going to talk about my pure hybrid. And when I mean hybrid, I'm doing damage, I'm doing condition damage, and I'm applying boons. So it's a great time, and you can fulfill really any role. This said, let's talk about armor, then traits, then some gameplay. So for my armor, I am taking full grieving. Power, condition damage, expertise, and precision. Great stat that came in with Path of Fire. I think the Harbinger utilizes it very well. And then as for the rune set, I've landed on Rune of the Renegade. Increased condition damage, but also ferocity, and it's just really good. For my weapons, I'm taking Scepter and Dagger. That's not usually the weapon that I really go to all that often. But other than this, I tend to rely a lot on my pistol and Warhorn. I'm running with Warhorn because it has a great CC skill with Wail of Doom, but also Locust Swarm can be a pretty useful ability for Life Siphon healing if you're in a little bit of a pickle with multiple enemies on you. Vipers, am I? No, this isn't Vipers. What is this? What is this? What is this? What is it? It's Ritualists. So I use the Ritualist stat for my accessories to increase my vitality just a little bit, get that condition damage, and also the concentration and expertise is amazing. For Soul Reaping, I'm taking Unyielding Blast, Soul Barbs, and Doomfire. Doomfire is really nice with this because your auto attack triggers so quickly. For Curses, I'm running with Insidious Disruption. Disabling a foe inflicts torment on them. Master of Corruption, considering I'm taking Corrosive Poison Cloud. And finally, I'm taking Weakening Shroud. If you need more healing, Parasitic Contagion is great, but because I am running Scepter, Lingering Curses is also a really nice one to take. Condition damage is increased, conditions inflicted by Scepter skills have longer durations, and your Feast of Corruption becomes Devouring Darkness. And then as for the Harbinger, I'm taking Wicked Corruption. Deal increased strike damage for each stack of Blight you have. Critical strikes deal increased damage to targets with Torment. So this is where the hybrid aspect starts to fall into play. I mean, throughout these traits, we have things that apply vulnerability, that do increased strike damage, and then we have more of the condition focus. When it comes to Harbinger, I expect a little bit more of that strike damage with Wicked Corruption, dealing increased damage per stack of Blight, but then also, and I was really surprised and happy to see this when the game launched, they added a second part to this trait. Critical strikes deal increased damage to targets with Torment. So not only am I getting use out of that ferocity, increased strike damage, but also we're getting a flat 10%, which is good. I like it. Next, I'm taking Twisted Medicine. Elixir skills also grant their boons to allies within the elixir impact radius. Gain concentration based on your vitality. That's also why I'm putting a little bit of Ritualist gear to gain vitality, gain use out of that concentration. Finally, I'm taking Deathly Haste. While in Harbinger Shroud, you will pulse quickness and fury to yourself and allies on a 3-second cooldown, or a 3-second interval. If you just want this, you can go for it. If you maybe want a little bit more damage, you could go Dark Gunslinger. Your pistol skills gain reduced recharge, and you also gain expertise based on your vitality, or you could go Implacable Foe, gain stability when entering Harbinger Shroud, and gain ferocity based on your vitality. For now, I have found a lot of use out of Twisted Medicine in group settings, so that's usually why I take this trait. And even for yourself, gaining that increased concentration isn't bad at all. As for my utility skills, we have elixirs. I'm still waiting for the elixir icons to be updated and changed because they still look very similar to each other and they're not really giving me that necromantic vibe. So we have Elixir of Promise. It's your heal. There's a bunch of different effects where if you use this at certain blight thresholds, they have increased effectiveness. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of the way that elixirs were changed. I kind of preferred the self-elixir playstyle back when we were first testing them in the beta. However, I would find it interesting if you went into Harbinger Shroud. If you had any elixirs, they would pop up here, and then they would be throwable and have their damaging conditions. Not how that works, so you have to kind of get used to a bloated tooltip. Essentially, if you get, it'll heal you, it'll apply some regen, and also if you happen to strike an enemy, it deals damage and poison. The more blight you have, the more those effects are increased. With Elixir of Risk, you can gain Might and Fury with this trait, Twisted Medicine. And Elixir of Anguish. This one is really, really important for group settings, especially because quickness has become its own role. And the same with Alacrity. It's now no longer just a trinity, but instead a pentagon of sometimes tanking, always DPS, sometimes you need a healer, and you always need a quickness provider and an alacrity provider. Yeah, the roles in this game are getting extremely weird, but that's for another video. For the damaging effects, we have Damage and Cripple, Corrosive Poison Cloud for extra condition damage and also projectile destruction, and finally, Elixir of Ambition. Great for all the boons in the game, and also if you afflict an enemy, they get a bunch of damaging conditions: bleeding, burning, confusion, poison, torment, and all that stuff. So since we went over the build, let's show this off in action. This build in particular does shine in group settings, but can definitely hold its own. Because we are going this pure hybrid build, your strikes and your flat strikes do pretty modest damage. So you can deal with attackers that might have resolution and compensate with that strike damage. If you have an enemy that has protection like this one, you can then rely on your conditions. And in Guild Wars 2, conditions usually tend to reign a little bit more supreme because you apply them and then they start rolling. Very few enemies out in the open world cleanse the conditions on them. So condies in this sense are basically free and guaranteed damage in most situations. Not all, but most. By throwing these elixirs down, we get to utilize those boons and also those damaging effects, and it's really good. Another thing about the pistol that's nice is that there's a lot of bouncing projectiles. For your first ability, it will bounce to another target. Your second ability will pierce enemies, and your third ability will strike enemies in a small radius. So a lot of your pistol attacks are great at cleaving enemies and actually have great area of effect properties. Another thing about Harbinger is, of course, the Harbinger Shroud. Especially with the quickness and the fury, Harbinger Shroud is really great, not only in your personal life by yourself, but also in group settings. Basically, you don't have to do anything except camp in Harbinger Shroud for most of the fight while spamming your auto attack because it applies burning and also torment. So you're getting two very, very strong conditions on enemies. Also, if you need to, you can weave in your second ability and your fifth ability to do extra damage, for your second ability to also apply extra torment, I believe, and the fifth ability to do some CC. Blight usually is not much of an issue in most situations that I've come in contact with, especially in group content. And with there being so many ways to get rid of Blight, Blight feels almost like a lost profession mechanic at this point. Like, it doesn't really mean much. Additionally, the only way to really gain Blight outside of Harbinger Shroud is by taking elixirs. So it is a little wonky, but then again, it incentivizes you to take those elixirs. And I mean, why wouldn't you by playing the Harbinger? They're very strong, they provide great boons, and even now they have damaging conditions. So I would recommend taking 1 or 2 elixirs if you are not currently taking any. What I would personally do to have better lines in the ground for Harbinger is have it to where your F1, your Harbinger Shroud, is where you generate that Blight. Instead of these abilities getting rid of Blight, maybe they add an extra stack or 2 of the Blight to make it more punishing to stay in Harbinger Shroud for longer periods of time. I would then make it to where most of these elixirs, especially the healing elixir, gets rid of the Blight. I think that could be an interesting way of having the seesaw mechanic of when you're in Shroud, you're gaining many stacks of Blight. When you're out of Shroud, if you want to get rid of that Blight, you could utilize these elixirs. Or I wouldn't expect Harbinger Shroud to be able to utilize, say, spectral skills, other corruptions, but if they just tailored it to the elixirs, maybe that could be interesting. And then maybe they could have more effects. It's similar to the way that the engineer tooltips and the tool belt skills work, where you have elixirs on your main utility slots, and then in your F1 abilities, when you're using your profession mechanic, those change. That's what I was kind of expecting for Harbinger, but they didn't really take it that far or go in that direction. All right, everyone, that was my Harbinger build. Honestly, just by staying in Harbinger Shroud, you gain so much quickness and so much fury. It's a really great time, and if you are looking to get into some group content, and maybe you want to play a DPS, but also provide very valued boons where you can fill a specific niche and a specific slot for that party, I highly recommend picking up the Harbinger. I've done most of my Dragon's End clears by playing this Harbinger build. I've done plenty of strike missions by playing this Harbinger build, and it's really, really good. I mean, quickness and fury at not even 50% boon duration in terms of concentration. I'm getting 4¼ seconds of quickness and fury. This could be bolstered up, I think, to like 6 seconds. Between with the strike damage and also the condition damage, it is a really nice way to play hybrid. Some people might argue that you should just do full Celestials at this point, but I like the idea of still honing in a little bit stronger to that damaging aspects with grieving stats. Thank you everyone so much for coming on by. Comment down below your thoughts about the Harbinger. Do you like the elixirs? Do you think it's sometimes confusing with the Blight? Is this just more so a me problem? Do you play mostly damage? Do you play mostly condition damage? Or have you felt that Deathly Haste, the quickness Grandmaster, has reigned supreme? Also to note, the other two Grandmasters are very boring. Not a huge fan. If you'd like to support the channel, you can subscribe, share, and comment down below. If you would like to support the channel in a more direct way, we have a Patreon where you get early access to videos and can recommend videos that you would like to see on the channel. If you'd like to order Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons, we have links below. Thank you so much, ArenaNet. And if you are interested in ExpressVPN or VPN services, we have ExpressVPN links in the description too, which also help out the channel. Thank you all so much for coming on by, and I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye, everyone. Mwah.